He replaced his turbo on Friday. By Sunday, it was leaking again. The shop blamed the unit. The fix? A $15 breather hose that was blocked, building crankcase pressure and forcing oil past the seals. Today, we use that same diagnostic path on your car. We'll read 9 symptoms: blue/black smoke on throttle, oil puddles, oily housings, falling dipstick levels, lag, whine, heat, and more, to find the true cause. You'll see how a simple return line restriction can mimic turbo failure, and how to decide between a $450 rebuild and a $1,200 replacement without guessing. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Why do brand new turbos start leaking in days when you followed the manual, primed the bearings, and used fresh oil and filters? You fire it up, the car runs fine, and then the telltale oil shows up near the turbo. No smoke you can count on, no codes, and the same leak you thought you just solved. That's the mystery that sends people back to the parts counter and keeps shops swapping units that aren't actually failing. You find oil in the turbo and nothing else looks wrong. The feed banjo is tight, the return gasket is fresh, and the compressor housing isn't cracked. Yet the replacement is already wet. The shop blames the unit, saying you must have gotten a bad cartridge. You suspect a cheap rebuild or off-brand seals. Meanwhile, the real problem hides in a hose you barely looked at because it's not the turbo. Here's the simple physics that turns a healthy turbo into a suspect. Your engine's crankcase must breathe. Combustion blow-by sneaks past rings and heads into the crankcase, and the PCV or breather system routes those gases out. When that path clogs with sludge or the hose collapses, pressure builds in the crankcase. Oil flows into the turbo under pressure and should drain back freely by gravity. Add crankcase pressure, and the oil can't leave as fast as it enters. It pools in the center housing and gets shoved past the turbine or compressor side seals. The seals aren't worn, they're overwhelmed. That's why most turbo failures trace back to oil problems: contamination, starvation, or blocked lines. Dirty oil chews bearings. A restricted supply starves the journal. A clogged return traps oil where it shouldn't sit. The turbo becomes the scene of the crime, not the criminal. If the leak appears right after installation, put ventilation at the top of your list. That's the pattern over and over. The brand new unit exposes a fault upstream, and the blame lands on the part that's easiest to see. There are 2 main paths to the same mess. A blocked breather, or PCV, raises crankcase pressure and pushes oil past the turbo's internal seals. A restricted return line slows the drain, creating a backup inside the housing. Both give you oil in the turbo. Both can leave residue in the exhaust or the compressor inlet, but the fixes aren't the same. One needs airflow restored through the breather system. The other needs a clear, downward-sloped, kink-free return with proper gasket sealing and no crushed banjo washers. Think of that $15 hose story that pops up in shops all the time. A fresh turbo goes on, leaks by the weekend, and everyone points fingers. The breather hose? It's kinked under the engine cover or packed with sludge. Replace it and the bad turbo dries up. The part cost lands in the lunch money range, and the comeback disappears. That's not a rare fluke, it's a clue you can use. In a minute, we'll decode 9 symptoms so you can trace where the oil starts moving wrong and why it looks like turbo death. Blue smoke under throttle, wet housings, falling dipstick, lazy spool, each points to a stage in the oil's path. The trick is reading them in sequence instead of chasing the loudest sign. Before we map anything, do the free check. Pull the breather or PCV line and feel for steady vacuum. If it's weak or pulsing, you have a restriction. Look for swollen walls, soft spots, or brown sludge inside the fittings. Clean passages should breathe. Blocked ones fight you. That first test tells you if the turbo is the victim of pressure or if the drain is the choke point you'll need to open next as we build the step-by-step symptom map. What do blue smoke, a whining spool, and a dipstick that keeps dropping have in common? They all trace oil movement through the turbo system, and they point to pressure or restriction long before the hardware gives up. Instead of guessing, use a simple map. Start where the oil enters, follow it through the bearings, and make sure it leaves by gravity. Each symptom tells you which stage is failing. Read them together and you can spot a ventilation fault, a clogged return, or an actual bearing problem without throwing parts at the car. Here's why this matters. Some cars eat oil with no visible smoke. Others only smoke when boost hits. That split trips people up. No smoke makes owners think the turbo is fine, while boost-only smoke screams, bad seal. Both can be wrong. A breather that can't flow or a return that's slow can hide the burn at idle and show it under load. The job is to connect the conditions where symptoms appear with where oil is getting stuck. Start with blue or black smoke when you roll into the throttle. That points to oil slipping past the turbine seal and burning in the exhaust. Don't assume the seal is worn. Check crankcase pressure at the breather and make sure the return line has a clean, downhill path with no kinks or excess sealant at the flanges. If pressure rises as boost climbs, oil can't drain fast enough, and the turbine side fills first. Fix the cause and the smoke fades. Now no smoke but oil turns up in the exhaust. That's a trap. Look for a slow return or crankcase pressure again, but add an exhaust back pressure check. A loaded DPF or a clogged cat raises pressure on the turbine outlet, which makes it harder for oil to stay in the center housing. You don't need a teardown yet. Crack a pressure port upstream of the brick and see if it loads under throttle. Free the exhaust and the invisible oil loss often stops. Find puddles after parking? Go straight to the turbo oil feed and return. Inspect the flanges, crush washers and gaskets. Retorque to spec and replace any washer that didn't crush cleanly the first time. Banjo bolts with hidden screen filters can clog and starve the feed while still weeping at the copper. On the return, pull the line, check for sludge, RTV strings, or a dent that narrows the bore. Gravity only works if the path is smooth and open. See oily film around the compressor or turbine housings? Don't guess. Clean the area, add UV dye to the oil, run the engine, then scan with a light. Use a bore scope to peek under heat shields and along the backside of the housings where leaks hide. A hairline crack or a misseated V-band can mimic a seal failure. If dye shows at a flange, you're chasing a gasket, not a core. If the dipstick keeps falling with no smoke trail, think load-dependent leaks. Long highway pulls can mist from the drain or weep past a gasket that seals fine at idle. Wipe every seam clean, drive under load, and recheck for fresh tracking. External weeps are cheaper than cores.